You're listening to Life Check Yourself with life coach, transformational leader, and dating and relationship badass, Marni Batista. Every week, you'll get the raw truth from top experts and real people on the important life and love issues you want to know about. So if you're ready to life check yourself in your relationships, your career, and the areas of your life that matter most to you, and you're not afraid to be called out on your stuff, then you're ready for what's next.
Life Check Yourself with Jessica Baum. How to identify your attachment style to finally have the big love you've dreamed of. Oh, ladies, you're good. Your heart's going to sing because I have the best guest. I know so many of you who are interested in dating know all about attachment styles. And so whenever I can find someone to help you heal yourself, I grab them and I say, you must come on the show. And so I have Jessica Baum here, and I'm super excited for you to meet her. She also dresses really well. I wish you could see her amazing blouse that she's wearing. Jessica is the founder of the Relationship Institute of Palm Beach, which is a practice that provides couples therapy, family counseling, and addiction therapy. And she's been a therapist for more than a decade, working with thousands of clients. And she has this really amazing approach for healing called the Self-Full Method. And she is so right for our campus because what she does is she helps her clients develop a meaningful connection with themselves, right? So that they can better understand how they relate to people in relationship. And she has a new book out called Anxiously Attached, and it's got a colon after it. Jessica, what's the full name of the book?
Anxiously Attached, Becoming More Secure in Life and Love. Which
is what y'all need to do right now. So Jessica also has a company called Be Self-Full, and she has online coaching and she has experts and courses, and she's a New Yorker who moved to the sun and fun in Florida. So let's just talk about, everyone who listens, has read that Paramount book on attachment style, and so many people want to know the ins and outs of anxious attachment style and how it relates to their love life. What do you think is the thing? People know what they know about it, but what do you think it is that they don't know, or they skim over, or they forget to remember when it comes to this whole piece around anxious attachment?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I think a big piece of explaining it in my book and getting the message out there is that attachment styles are embedded patterns, and they're patterns that get developed very, very early on. And I can talk a lot about how that happens, and they end up being embedded in our nervous system. So our nervous system, it has these responses to pain and connection, and there are things that we developed young, but then we repeat those same responses in our adult relationship. And that's a lot about attachment theory, is that the way in which we learn to adapt and survive, and for anxious people to stay in connection when we were small, is the way that we will continue to adapt and to survive, to stay in connection in our romantic relationships. And often for anxious people, it comes with a lot of self-sacrificing and codependent relationships. But it's really about how you adapt it, and you probably brilliantly adapted, but it's learning to unlearn those things and to have compassion for the way in which you adapted, and to really understand your own nervous system when it comes to you and the people that you attach to.
Well, I want to talk about this because I was thinking about this the other day. Isn't, or maybe it's not true, but isn't everyone somewhat anxious? Or when you say anxious people, is there a spectrum of anxiety? How do you know, whether you just have regular run-of-the-mill normal anxiety or you're an anxious person?
Everybody has a healthy degree of anxiety to survive in the world, but when you're thinking about anxious attachment, it's about 25% of the population fall under that. And it is very different from avoidant, which also has anxiety. It just shows up differently, or secure, who has less anxiety. And that's not to say that a secure person can't have anxiousness in their relationships if they partner with someone who's really avoidant. But people with an anxious attachment system tend to be hyper-focused on the external. They tend to have a deep-rooted abandonment wound. The way in which they survive is to keep things stay close and plan, and sometimes they can appear controlling even though they're just trying to kind of create some calmness in their world. They tend to sometimes have lower self-esteem and self-sacrifice and build resentment later on. And it's because they are externally focused and sometimes struggle with getting their own needs met internally, or even knowing what their own needs are, because when they were younger, they kind of became like good readers of the room or caretakers, or they're very empathic to other people's needs. So they overextend themselves externally and tend to abandon themselves a lot internally as a way to survive. And so they still do that romantically, and they end up saying, I'm in the same relationship with this narcissistic or selfish person. And it's a lot because they have these self-abandonment tendencies that they needed to have in order to survive as a child. And now they need to learn how to undo that.
When you said something that you said, I just think is so like lightning bolt moment, is you said, you get really good at reading the room. And I think that happens so unconsciously, right? Like, talk more about what that looks like so that people can kind of like find their place inside that. Because I think that people do that so naturally and unconsciously that they're not even realizing that that's part of an anxious attachment style.
That's such a good question. And I could geek out a little bit on the neuroscience.
Let's do it. I love geeking out on neuroscience.
We all have something called neuroception. It was a term coined by Dr. Stephen Porges, and it's inner and outer cues that send our body into a state of survival, fight, flight, freeze. And people with anxious attachment, it's also referred to as ambivalent attachment, have a hypervigilance towards abandonment. So their amygdala and part of how they are consciously, subconsciously, or even unconsciously looking out for when they might be abandoned and when they might be left. So they're going to pick up on any cues around that. And they're just trying to prevent themselves from the feeling of abandonment that lives very deep inside themselves. So they become hyper vigilant of the external world to try to protect themselves.
That's so deep. I was thinking, when you said that, I was thinking this morning, I definitely have come from the anxious attachment style. And so I think that, and I've done a shit ton of work, which is, people always say, I've done a shit ton of work. And, but today we were riding bikes to go get breakfast, and my husband was ahead of me, and he turned right. And I just was like going straight, because he didn't say, oh, we're going to turn right at the end of this thing. And he was like, I didn't mean to like, not tell you. I just thought you were following me. And I realized in my brain, it was like, you're leaving, you're trying to like diss me. You're trying to leave me, right? Like there's that old thing of like, wait, were you trying to abandon me? Even though I've done all this work. And I just wanted to draw this out, because I think for those who are listening, like that you have the book and you the t-shirt, that these things are so subtle, because you're talking about neural wiring that has been formed again and again and again. It's almost like you're wearing these certain glasses and that's how you see everything. Is that accurate? Like that it's so deeply embedded in our neural processing?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the felt sense of, can I trust this person? Are they doing this? And it's good for you to be able to have what we call dual awareness. And I think that's part of the path towards healing, is that, my husband went the other way and my body was telling me maybe, this doesn't feel right. So my narrative is he trying to leave me? But you have this other part of you that's like, it's really the sensation that's old. And you can change your narrative to, that's an old sensation, but he's not trying to leave me, and rebuild the trust there because you have a good partner. But again, these sensations that live in our body and our nervous system are always there. And then we start to understand that they're old, and we stop applying them always to the here and now. And that's when we start to heal that and not blame the other person or project a lot of that out and start to see, okay, this is old wounding that's showing up in the here and now. It's still really painful, but it's not all pliable in the here and now. My body's just sensing abandonment and it's protecting me from that. Yet that's not actually what I'm experiencing with my husband right now. So it's a correct experience in a lot of ways for you.
Yeah. And I think that when our listeners are just out and about and, they're dating and they're interpreting like text messages, right? Or how somebody responds online or how somebody stands, waiting for the valet, whatever it is, right? The narrative is so deep. So how do you know that you're in it in the moment? I think people are always asking those questions. Like, so if I'm in it and I feel that in my body, or maybe people aren't even feeling it in their body, but like, what's a way to start to have what you called that dual awareness and maybe do something about it?
Yeah. I mean, so when we're younger, we have something called implicit memory. And so that's before explicit. So we store sensation and we don't have a hippocampus fully formed. So when we're really little, we're storing sensation and trauma, if you want to use the word, but is embedded in our body. So when the sensations are really big, we know it's really old. And I think you can start to have compassion for yourself because when the sensations are big, we tend to lash out, we tend to get angry, we tend to respond because it's really painful. But if you're having those painful, big sensations happen inside you, that's your body's way of saying something old is coming up to the surface. And so that's an opportunity to be with that. And sometimes you do need, a therapist or a coach that really understands somatic work and holding these spaces to help you re-experience these sensations again and start to understand that you are not them. They're an old part of you that's coming up. And you then can start to see, I'm in a little bit of a regress state or my nervous system is scared right now. And that's when you develop the compassion and the space and the neuroplasticity to start to make these changes. They don't happen overnight, but the awareness starts to happen with the right support. And with the right support, so does some self-compassion over all of our behaviors, because I think anybody who's listening who has experienced anxious attachment has a list of behaviors they're not proud of, but it just gets so scary inside your body that you'll do a lot of things to try to get back into connection. That's normal. I mean, connection is our biological imperative and we want to be in connection and we're not in connection. It's extremely painful for anyone, not just someone who's anxiously attached.
Right.
Anyone really, getting ghosted or not getting responded by someone you love is probably a very familiar feeling and it's cumulative. And so big sensations come up, which is a sign to stop here and get the support and heal these sensations. So you're not driving your life from them anymore. You're more conscious of them.
I think this is really interesting. I've been doing a lot of research for this article that I've been writing and studying this whole idea about like how we are trained up, especially I think as women, but to avoid negative feelings, right? To like get rid of them, not feel them, not express them. And so what's interesting about this is like your body is trying so hard to protect you, right? And so when you're numbing out, it's like you're not aware of this huge signal that is a point toward shifting and changing, right? Because you're like, it feels bad. I don't, I'm not going to forget it. You know what? I didn't like that guy texting me. I was online for 10 minutes and I got someone asked me to send him a pic, of myself naked, or I got a dick pic. Our brains just don't want to deal with those big sensations or feelings, and then we miss out on life. And I think that's so tragic, right? Because that's kind of the way into actually starting to heal, yeah?
Absolutely. And I think that I call them protectors, whether it's a cookie or a shopping app for me, or sometimes I go on realtor.com and I get lost, and sometimes it's alcohol for people or drugs, and there's no judgment. And like you said, it's sad, but it's also about like, what am I doing to distract myself from the sensations because I need to, And when can I feel safe enough in the safe enough relationships, whether it's friendships or a therapist or someone who can hold space, to not distract myself? And even more, can I start to notice if I do need to medicate or I do need to numb out? That's okay. But like being conscious of the process itself rather than being unconscious of it, really important.
Totally. Okay, let's talk about this idea of chemistry, because I have been avidly watching a couple of reality dating shows lately. Do you ever watch any of those, Jessica?
No, but everyone has been telling me to watch Love is Blind, I think.
Yes.
I just don't.
I know.
I haven't had time, but a lot of people have told me, you need to watch this, you need to watch this.
Well,
And
it's interesting because of this, and you don't, if you don't watch people, you can still, this still will be interesting to you. I read this article about why does it work, right? They put these people in a pod and they talk for like 20 hours a day, and basically in like a week they propose to someone, like if it goes well, right? And so there's this whole article that I read, and it's like, basically our brains are so hungry to find something to connect over, right? Like it's like, oh, you like deep dish pizza? Me too, right? You're like, oh my God, you're my soulmate. And I said to someone, I'm like, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to be in a pod. That's what dating is, right? You have this thing that feels familiar, and then you make up a narrative about it and you attach to it, and you might call it chemistry, but sometimes it's unhealthy. So like, what is healthy chemistry? How do you know that you're moving past just this familiar thing that makes it feel like love or makes it feel like it's your person, but you're actually just in a pattern?
Yeah. And I mean, it's a very complicated question because it's not so black and white. But I think, there are people you're going to gravitate towards, like you say, that there's a familiarity to it. And the more work you do on it, I mean, if you grew up in a home with a lot of chaos, if someone really stable comes who's secure, that might feel really uncomfortable for you. You might naturally, subconsciously grab towards someone who will present chaos to you. And sometimes we don't even know that we're doing that. And there's no judgment with who you pair up with, but sometimes you're attracted to people who are going to bring the work up for you, which are more turbulent relationships. And I would say, like, a rule of thumb for those that are listening, because I can't give broad statements, but if you're attracted to someone who is ghosting you or is inconsistent, especially for people who have anxious attachment, who love bombs you, or either coming on so strong and they don't really know you yet. You haven't had rupture and repair, which is conflict yet. And they're here one minute and then not the next, and they're not consistent enough for you. It's usually a red flag that you're attracted to maybe someone who's unavailable. And if someone who's unavailable, hard to attain, is someone you're attracted to, you just really want to look at that, because you're setting yourself up for basically a reenactment for another unavailable person. And you're trying to resolve your trauma through someone who can't help you heal. Like, we're looking for healing relationships. So being really honest with, if you identify as someone who has anxious attachment or codependency, what is it that I truly need to heal? And that's safe relationships. And what does safe mean? It doesn't mean love bomb bliss, but it might mean consistent, someone who has stability in their life, someone who responds on time, someone who has boundaries in their life. I mean, it's about really getting honest about what you need versus what you might be attracted to, and looking at, what are you attracted to? I'm a big believer that we can attract our opposites, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. But when you're attracted to someone who's unavailable or proving that narrative of your self-worth not being enough through their actions from the beginning, you really want to say, okay, why am I chasing this? Or why am I so interested in this? Am I trying to resolve a wound through this pattern? And am I setting myself up to be re-injured again? Because people show you through their actions and their words and consistency who they are. So just getting honest and really asking yourself those questions if you are out there dating.
When you were writing your book, were there any points in that process where you were like, this is like so important for people, like this part, or this is this thing, like this connected dot that people just need to understand. Did you have any moments at certain sections or certain pieces as you were writing this book?
Yeah, so many. I mean, God, this book has so much of these aha moments for me. But I think I talk a lot about the anxious avoidant dance, and I talk about co-dysregulation. So what I mean by that is a lot of people come to me and couples, and both people are activated at the same time, and they can't quite understand what's going on a conscious level. And so an avoidant person pulls away and an anxious person gets angry or tries to get closer, and there's this pattern that takes place. So a big part of my book was trying to break down that pattern so that anyone reading it understands and is compassionate of what's happening for each person, their nervous system on both sides, and what they can do to either break the pattern or just start to understand the pattern in a new lens. That was a big aha moment. And then another thing that came through the book, and it's a big message of the book, but it's hard to express unless you experience it, is that part of healing attachment wounds is internalizing healthy people. And we have these corrective experiences, whether it's with a therapist or a friend. I have a friend who's been there for me my whole life. And we can say, oh, I really depend on these people, or how would they respond? But then at a certain point, because we didn't take on maybe a healthy internalized parent when we were young, maybe we took on their anxiety or their absence or their fear. But as adults, when we form these healthier relationships, we internalize those relationships too, and they become part of how we build our secure sense of self. So I know I can depend on this person, and this person, but I also know what it would feel like if they were in the room with me. I can also start to think about what they might say to me. So these are how we start to self-regulate. It's through these external experiences that become internalized, which was kind of a hard concept to explain in the book, because I also think it's a concept that, I hear clients all the time say, well, if Jessica was with me right now, what would she say or do? And one of my clients, her arm, and it's like, you want to bring nurturing, caring, loving people from the external world into your internal world. That's how you build that ego strength. That's how I call it inner community. And so that's a process that's pretty out there, but so vital to building inner security. And it's through healthy relationships. It's not like we go out and we learn how to love ourselves. It's we take the experiences that are loving and we sense into them and we feel them. And then from that experience, we create self-love. So it's backwards. I can't stand it when people are like, go love yourself. It's like, it's really hard to figure out how to love yourself if you haven't had a really loving relationship to have some kind of framework to start that internal process with.
That's so deep. So I want to circle back to that, but I want to also sort of hone in on the point you made before about having compassion and understanding other people, because I was thinking, and I think that I hear this all the time, just out and about. How many people are in a relationship or you're dating someone and one person is on the phone a lot, right? And I was thinking when you were saying that, like, I totally realized, and I've been with my husband almost 13 years, but it just hit me the other day because I was thinking about all of this in preparation for our conversation and just some other things I've been doing. And I was like, oh my God, my husband's on the phone all the time, right? And my anxious avoidant, that part of me that is still having that moment, is like, oh, you don't want to be with me. But also for him, that's kind of how he regulates. Right? Is like he's on the phone. It makes him feel right. It's like I joke. It's his he's British, so they call it the noi, like, the British thing for a pacifier, right? But like he's working on that. But like for me to understand, like, oh, other people are trying to regulate in their own way. So what if it's not about me, right? Right?
Yeah.
And so when you said that, I was like, oh, that's such a great example of how someone who's anxious avoidant, granted, you want your partner to be present. And also, like when we're anxious avoidant, right, we're going to be like, oh, you're not with me. You don't care about me, right? Like that kind of narrative.
I think that's such a good example because the phone is such a common thing. And like I said, with geeking out earlier with neuroception, it can be something as simple as your partner picking up the phone that cues your body into they're not present with me. And you're right, your husband is probably regulating with his phone, and you had to, again, do awareness. And I think what's important to remember is having a conversation with your partner or whomever and being honest, like, what's coming up for me? And can I request your presence? And when I request it, can you put the phone down? And if you can't, what must be going on for you? Right? That you feel so compelled and need that in that moment. And can I start to understand that that's what's really going on for you, and get out of my own pain in that moment and get curious on your side of the street? And could we compromise and come up with a way when you feel more resourced to put your phone down and be really present for me, or I can request that from you? And I've been in situations personally, but I've also seen it with clients where you're on your phone. I mean, I'm on my phone a lot. I work off my phone. But if you ask for my presence, I put my phone down and I'm there for you. But if you're just looking at me around the house or at work, you're going to assume that I am unavailable. But I am pretty available. We can't always be available all the time. And that cue of the phone can just awaken so much in so many people. And I think the phone, because it pulls us out of ourselves and it pulls us out of the present moment, it can be a protector, and it can also do damage in the relationship unless we start to have these conversations. And it's not that the behavior changes, but the why behind the behavior and the why behind what your experience starts to make sense. And slowly the behavior changes, or at least the communication around the behavior becomes less defensive and more requesting or just more conscious.
Yeah, I'm so glad you addressed that, because I mean, I don't know if, what the top things couples argue about is like money, sex, and maybe now the phone is up in the top 5, right? Like, put your phone down. So let's also talk about the second thing you were mentioning, which is this idea of having relationships, healthy relationships, as a framework for healthy self-love. And I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit on that, because I also sort of feel like, everyone says, like, if RuPaul, if you can't love yourself, how are you going to find someone to love? But what does it mean? What does it mean? And so many people think self-love is, I took myself to get a facial, or, I got a manicure, or whatever, some sort of treat that you give yourself. And I would love for you to more deeply dive in before we go. And then people can, of course, get the book, pre-order that book, and really dive into this. But I just think it's such a fresh approach.
Yeah, I mean, and I talk about it, like a trip to the spa is absolutely a great start. And there are plenty of people out there that have a lot of shame or guilt doing little things like a manicure for themselves. But yes, and that it's a start. But like I said, I think self-love, if you haven't experienced, and if you're listening to this right now, I'm sure there hopefully is one relationship in your life, even if it's your dog or an aunt or a teacher, somebody in your life that you remember being genuinely warm, caring, and nurturing, and genuinely just saw you and was present with you. If you can recall what it felt like to be around them, what their advice would be, you can start to understand that this is the voice that helps you cultivate, or you pull in to start to cultivate how to respond to the part of you that might be judgmental or critical or shaming or hard or guilty, that you're pulling in these nurturing, supportive experiences so that you can develop a healthier voice inside to tend to your inner world. So we can't learn how to be compassionate to ourselves if we don't shift and become an observer and then feed ourselves with warmth and love and start to understand our behavior, or start to understand our protections, or start to look at it from a new lens. And we need an experience, one experience at least. And I swear your dog can be it, because your dog releases a lot of feel good, unconditional love experiences. But if you did have a parent or a sibling or a teacher, I know someone who had a teacher, you really can cultivate a lot just by thinking about that one amazing experience. And it's from that energy that you want to start to develop a healthier internal ego state, but a healthier resource from within. So it's really, it takes a little bit of work. And it's also, if you're doing the work, if you choose to do the work with a therapist, it's about letting that therapist or coach, if they're really skilled, be with the parts of you that are anxious, that are really feeling abandoned, that are really scared, and letting someone else be that nurturing, supportive presence and be in the sensation with you. It's not about fixing it. It's about holding it. It's really about holding it. And maybe when you were younger, your parents were doing the best that they could, but they couldn't hold those sensations with you for whatever reason, what they were going through. But we have to rehold those sensations with someone who can or has the capacity, so that you develop a bigger capacity to be with more parts of yourself.
I love that.
Yeah. No, it's mind blowing, and it's work. But when people do the work, they're like, oh, it's hard. But I think at a certain point you start to be like, but I'm shifting. And it's like, okay, I can keep leaning into the stickiness or the uncomfortableness because I can see how I'm shifting. And people are like, wow, it's really working. Even when it's hard and you're having a trauma response or a big sensation, you're like, oh, I hate this. When you do the work, you start to shift out of that faster. You get back to your homeostasis faster. You're be able to hold more of yourself, and more of yourself implicit memories surface, because now you can tend to it differently, or you have the support around you that can help hold it and tend to it differently. So therefore that's where the healing happens. But you can't fake safety, and you can't fake this. So you do really need to pull in warm, nurturing, non-judgmental people and have had some experience of that in order to start to cultivate the space for healing and change and transformation inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I talked earlier about how we don't learn how to have those big emotions, right? So all those coping mechanisms that we develop, but the bottom line is doing that work so that we can have them the full range of all our emotions. Because I think people who are listening, we're talking about dating, you're listening because you want to have great, deep love. And if you're not able to cultivate these skills that you're talking about, then we also are blocking ourselves from the other big emotion, which is joy and love, right? And playfulness and all of those other things. And so I think it's so brilliant. I read this book a while back called The Midnight Library, and it reminded me when you said a teacher. And basically this woman is in her 30s, and she's really unhappy, and she feels like, all of her choices were bad choices. She's super anxious about it. She's in a ton of regret. And so the premise of the story is that this teacher comes back. She has this spiritual experience, but it's in a library basically. And the person that's sort of like the gatekeeper that's going to take her on this spiritual journey is her teacher. Because when all the crap was happening to her when she was young, it was the librarian who was the one who really saw her when she was really young. And so I thought, oh my gosh, there's just so many people in our life that we have those moments with that it's really beautiful to be able to call those moments in, and none are too small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I just got chills in my body when you say that. And I hope who's listening, because their narrative might be like, no one was there. And if you really think back and explore, I am sure there were some experiences where you did feel seen, and that's a really seen. And our parents, my book is not about blaming our parents, but understanding that they were stuck in survival states and giving us the love in the way that they received it. And that's where intergenerational stuff kind of gets passed down. So, I mean, it's about understanding that you might have not gotten what you need because your parents didn't get what they needed and their parents didn't get what they needed. And that's how that all happens. But now it's your opportunity to get more of what you need and hold more. And it's like we all have those big sensations, and we have to medicate until there's enough safety for us to be with those sensations. And that is really the expansion of the capacity to be more with ourselves, is where the transformation and the healing happens. And it's not easy. It's really not easy. It's courageous work. to really start to be with more and more of yourself. And if you're listening, you're so not alone. So many people are in different stages of just kind of being with yourself. And there's people who are here to support you and hold up the light. And yet it's a path where there's a little uncertainty because more and more things can keep unfolding. But yet I think when you can trust into the right support, you can allow for that unfolding or that awakening. I'm trying not to use the word trigger anymore, because every time something's activated in you, I'd say it's awakened so that you can be with it, rather than this like trauma and shame word. We're awakening parts of ourselves so that we can be with it differently. And that's actually what takes away the charge. Like it becomes more bearable and more bearable and more bearable. So, if you're listening, just keep doing the work and keep looking inward and know that you're just really not alone in your healing process, and that healing's not always easy, but it does. I really wholeheartedly believe that it works. And that's what's so exciting about the book, is I share personally, and I really do believe that, if you find the right support and you really get the right knowledge, that we all have the capacity to heal, and neuroplasticity certainly supports the ability to build new pathways and have corrective experiences. So it is spiritual, and it's a scientific explanation of the healing process.
I love that. I saw a post, it's going around apparently, because I was telling someone else about it. They're like, I saw that about choose your hard. And I just think it's such an important thing. The post is something like, being in a relationship is hard. Dating is hard. Being an entrepreneur is hard. Hating your job is hard. You have to pick what it is that you're going to be courageous about, because that's the human journey, right? And I love that you're saying, if you're listening to this, however many 40, 50,000 people that are downloading this so far this month, they're if we're all in a room, we'd be like, oh my God, me too. And then for all of those people that are struggling, there's all those people that healed through the work that everyone who comes on this show, including you, does. So I'm super honored to have you. Congratulations on your book. Ladies, if you pre-order the book, Jessica has amazing meditations and some other gifts. And so links to all that are on the show notes. So make sure you check that out. And just because you read one book about attachment doesn't mean that you don't know it all. Jessica's got a way out, and I love her approach.
Yeah, thank you so much. And this is definitely, it's way more than that's out there about this particular attachment style and the anxious avoidant dance from a completely different lens. And if you do click on the link and pre-order, you can go to Amazon and order. But if you pre-order, I send out information, every month, sometimes twice a month. And you'll get a ton of free things, but you'll be in connection with me. And I truly put my heart into every email. So you're going to get really great information wherever you are in your journey. And, I'll be able to support you in that way too. So I look forward to hopefully many of you starting this path and, exploring this from this lens.
Awesome. Well, Jessica, again, congratulations. Thank you so much for sharing your heart here. And ladies, I think you have a whole set of things you can do now to life check yourself. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for tuning into today's show. So if being in an intimate relationship in which you feel 100% seen, heard, and accepted by a high caliber man is a priority for you right now, and you're interested in seeing if you're a fit for working with me and my team at Dating with Dignity, here's what I want you to do. Just head over to DWD VIP, that's D as in dating, W, D as in dating, VIP.com, and book a call to speak with my team. We'll get on the phone with you for about 60 minutes, and you'll get crystal clear on what's stopping you from finding true love right now. We'll also take a look at what you want to create, what you want your whole life to look like when you're able to finally be fully expressed as a woman in a healthy relationship with an incredible guy. And if we can help you get from where you are right now to where you want to be, we will show you the fastest path possible that makes sense for you to do that. We help smart, successful women all over the world solve this one missing piece in their life so they can finally have it all. So to see if we can help you do the same thing, head over to dwdvip.com. I'm Marni Batista, and let's talk soon.